In this example, I'm going to create, well, a kind of a game, a very, very simple game. All we're going to try and do is have a snowball that can hit a snowman. That's about it. So not the most fun game, but the challenge is how can we tell when that snowball has hit the snowman? And this is a challenge that will come up again and again if you're doing any kind of a game or interactive P5 sketch where you need to tell, is one thing on your screen, on your canvas, touching something else? And then responding to that. So that's the main thing that we're going to work through today. So I've created a new sketch and I'm going to go to the sketch folder and add a file, and I'm going to add a snowman.js and a snowball.js. And if you open your project folder, after doing that, you should see those two files in there, snowman.js and snowball.js. And while we remember, just click into that index.html, and we need to link these into the sketch in order for them to be accessible in your sketch. So easiest way to do that is just copy that line 12 there and make 2 copies of that line and just change sketch.js to snowman.js and snowball.js. All right. Then in the sketch, well, let's just sort of think first about what this sketch should look like. So basically, what I want to have happen is in the canvas, a user clicks, and then a snowball gets added to the canvas, and it goes shooting across the screen, and we're trying to hit a snowman. That's the game, right? So let's start by drawing this circle and thinking about how to get the mouse interaction working and then the movement working of the circle. So I'm going to click back into my editor and go into snowball.js and start defining the snowball class. So I use the keyword class and then the name of the class, so snowball, and then curly brackets. And everything between these curly brackets is what defines the class. The first thing you'll need is a constructor function. And this is the function that gets called when a new object of that class is first created. So when we use the new keyword, and then so we say ball equals new snowball, this is the function that gets called. So what you need to think about here is what information do you need in order to create a snowball? And I'd say there's probably 3 things: an x position, a y position, and a speed. So let's just give it an x, a y, and a speed as an argument, right? So I can just say this.x equals x, this.y equals y, and this.speed equals speed. So what that's doing is with this keyword, that represents the object that's about to be created. There's this freshly minted object has kind of just come into existence, and it's referenced by this this keyword. And when we say this.x, it's taking the value of that argument x that's been given to us by whoever called this function, probably you, taking that x and then storing it inside the new object. Same with y, same with speed. Now let's think about showing the snowball on the screen. We'll make a function called show. It doesn't need any arguments, so we can just leave the brackets empty. And to draw a snowball is pretty simple. We'll just draw a circle. So circle, this.x, this.y, and a radius. And let's give it a radius of 10. Right. So here you can see we've stored the value of x in this.x. And then we're using it down here when we draw the circle. We're saying this.x again. So I'll save that and then go back into the sketch. And right at the top, I'll declare a variable, let ball. And then in setup, I'll say ball equals new snowball. And I need to give it that information, the x, the y, and the speed. So the x Well, let's think about that. If the radius of the ball is 10, I want there to be a little bit of a margin, so let's say another 10 for the margin. That's 20 total for the x. And I'm not going to respond to the mouse click at the moment, I'm just going to draw it halfway down the page. So that's height over 2. So height over the 2 for y, and x 20 for the x. So it's going to be a new snowball with 20x, height over 2y, and I'll give it a speed of 5. So that's creating the ball, and then we need to show it. So we need to call ball.show. So any of these functions you define on your objects, they'll just sit there and they won't do anything until you actually call them by saying ball.show or ball.update and so on. So always remember that. So there it is, our ball is on the screen. It doesn't do much, it just sits there. So what we need to think about next is, how do we use the speed of the ball to move the ball a little bit each time through the draw function? So have a think about how you might solve that for a little bit. You can pause the video if you like and try and figure that out yourself, and see if you can come up with a solution. Otherwise, I'm going to do that now. Did you have a think about it? All right, well, this is how I would do it. So we've got these two values already for our snowball. We've got the x and the y, and I actually already gave you a clue. The other one is the speed. So I'm just going to give a number for that speed, and I'm going to use it each time when I update the snowball. Each time through the draw loop, I'm going to move the x position over a little bit. And that's how I'm going to animate the ball across the screen. Each time through the draw loop, I'm going to update the snowball, and I'm going to just change this x position. And I'm going to use the value of speed to do that. So I'm going to just add that on to the x. And basically, that's my update function. So if I go back to my snowball.js, create a new function update, and just say this.x plus equals this.speed, right? Pretty simple. And then we need to use that, so I need to say ball.update. I'm going to put that after the show. So I want to show it first in its current state, and then update it in preparation for the next draw cycle. So there it goes. It goes across the screen. Now it's not very fun at the moment because the ball is just created once at the very start, and then it just races off the screen, and we never sort of see it again. So next thing we should do is think about, how do we respond to mouse input to create a new ball? Oops. So what I'm going to do is create a new function, mouse pressed. If you define a function called mouse pressed, and there's a bunch of these event functions in P5.js, P5.js, if you define that function, it will call it whenever the user presses a mouse button on the canvas. And there's other ones like mouse dragged, mouse released. A really easy way to add user interactions to your canvas. So when the mouse is pressed, basically what I want to do is take this line here and move that down into that mouse press. So the ball only gets created when the mouse is pressed. And instead of just setting it always at height over 2, I'm going to use the y position of the mouse. So I'm going to say mouse y instead of height over 2. Now, if I run this, I'm going to get an error, and I wonder if you can see what that will be. I get uncaught type error, cannot read property show of undefined on line 10. And that's line 10 when I'm trying to show the ball, and then line 11 would give the same update. And the reason is that I've declared the variable for the ball on line 1. I've said let ball. But I used to be creating it in the setup function. I used to be creating a new ball object, but I'm not anymore. I'm now not doing that until the mouse gets pressed. And because no one's pressed the mouse yet, that ball variable is still undefined. So it actually doesn't know anything about how to show or update. It's just an undefined variable. So what we need to do is put this in an if statement. We need to check, has the ball been created yet? So basically, a really, really easy trick to do that in JavaScript is to just say if ball. So this is a sort of a quirk of JavaScript. If you give, it will try and interpret variables in a helpful way. And if you give an undefined variable to an if statement, it will interpret that as being false. It kind of makes sense if you think about it, like if something's not there, well, I can't really do anything with that. So if that's one way of sort of thinking about it. So this statement will only ever happen if ball has been defined. So there it is, and now we can click. And the ball goes across the screen at the mouse Y position that we clicked. Now you might notice that if I click really fast, the ball doesn't get a chance to go all the way across because it's just being sort of written over with a new version of the ball. You could think about ways to have more than one ball on the screen at once. That might be something we could try adding to this in a future version of this example. But for now, this is good enough for this example. So the next thing I'm going to do is draw the snowman. So let's go back to the snowman class and define the sort of skeleton for the class. It's going to be class snowman, curly brackets, constructor. We're probably going to need an X and a Y position to draw this thing onto the screen. And we're going to say this dot X equals X and this dot Y equals Y. I mean, you might sort of wonder sometimes when you're defining your own classes, what should you actually have in the constructor function? Basically what you need there is you need all of the information that the class needs to know about in order to create itself. It's not always obvious what that is, so don't stress too much about it. You can always come back and add in more information later if you discover you need to add some more stuff. This is going to be fine for us for now. Let's just sort of think about graphically how we would draw this snowman. So I've given it an X and a Y. First thing I should think about is what does that X and Y refer to? And I'm going to say that in this case, the X and the Y of the snowman, it's a very wonky snowman, the X and the Y of the snowman is the center of the head. And the head is going to have a radius of 15, so it's going to be a little bit larger than the snowball, which has a radius of 10. This one's going to have a radius of 20, and this one's going to have a radius of 25. So that means that whatever the X position is, the Y position is going to be, for that one is going to be Y. The center of this circle is going to be Y plus 15 plus 20, 35. And the Y of this last one is going to be Y plus 35 plus 20 plus 25, which is 80. So if I go back to the screen, I can say show circle this dot X, this dot Y, and 15 for the head. Whoops. I'm just going to copy and paste that. So this dot Y plus 35 and this dot Y plus 80, and this is 20 and this is 25. So we've defined the snowman there. Let's use it now in the sketch. I'll create a new variable, let snowy. And I'm going to initialize this variable in the setup function. So snowy equals new snowman. And let's think about where this goes on the page again. So just like with my snowball, I wanted it to be 20 in from the left. I want my snowman to be some margin. So let's say 10 plus this radius, right? So 25 plus 10 in from the right. So that's actually width minus 35. So width minus 35 and height over 2. I'll just put it in the center of the canvas. I've declared it and then I need to show it. Snowy.show. So there's the snowman and then we can fire snowballs at it. Right, we're almost there. So the last thing to do is to think about how do we tell when a snowball goes past and is missing versus when one goes past and actually hits the snowman. So I think it's a good idea to work this out on paper as well. I'm going to start just with the case of where we're trying to hit just the head of the snowman. So just that single circle at the top of the snowman. Got that there. And this has a radius, remember, from the center out. That distance is 15. Now the snowball that's coming along has a radius of 10. So have a think about what's the minimum distance that these two centers of these circles can be apart before they start to overlap. Well, if you think about it, if two circles are touching, no matter where they're touching, the distance between the centers of those circles is always equal to the radius of the first circle plus the radius of the second circle. Right? Even if it's touching over here or up here, that distance is always 10 plus 15. It's always 25. So if the distance between the centers of the circles is ever any less than 25, what that means basically is there must be some overlap. So that's the test that we will use to see whether the snowball has hit the head of the snowman. So basically what I'm going to do is switch back into snowman.js and I'm going to add a function here called isHit. And this function of the snowman is going to return true if a ball has hit the snowman and false if the ball has not hit the snowman or is not currently hitting the snowman. So it needs to have the information about that ball, so I'm going to give the ball as an argument to the function. So what I'm going to do here is go let head dist equals distance from ball.x ball.y to this.x this.y. So the dist function is a built-in function of P5JS and it just gives you the distance between two xy points. So this is going to give us the distance from between the center of the head and the center of the snowball. And we just figured out on paper that if that distance is less than 25, then the snowball and the head are overlapping. It is hitting. So we can just say return true in that case. Otherwise, return false. So that is actually going to give us some simple collision detection for the head. Let's use that in the sketch. What I'm going to do is, by default, I'm going to set the fill color to be white. And if the snowman has been hit, I'm going to change the fill color to be red, and then I'm going to then when the snowman gets shown, it's going to be colored in red. So here I'm going to say if snowy.isHit ball fill 25500. Let's see. So if I put it across the bottom, it doesn't do anything. On the foot of the snowman, there it hit the head. But on the tummy, it shouldn't do anything, no. Right, so that seems to be working. Now have a think about, why did I put this test in between showing the ball and updating the ball? Why would I put it there? Remember what this update function does. It changes the X position of the snowball, right? And here we've already shown the current position of the snowball on the screen. So I think it's better to do this here with the current position, because that's what we're showing on this animation frame, before we update the ball. Because what you might end up with is a situation where the snowball has almost gone past the, was not quite hitting the snowman yet. Right? But then after updating, they are overlapping. So you could get a situation where on the screen what's shown is a frame of animation where they're not overlapping, but the snowman actually goes red. So the order here is a little bit interesting. It's worth thinking about. Okay, we've done the head, so let's now think about how we could do a similar test on the tummy or the foot of the snowman. So if I go back to my sketch, we've got the head with balls coming from every direction. We've got the tummy, oops, and we've got the foot of the snowman. Basically, it's exactly the same test. We just need to change the y value plus 35 and y plus 80, and change this radius. So this radius is 25 and this radius is 20. So that minimum distance here is 25, here it's 30, and here it's 35. So that's all of the info we need to do the rest of the tests. I'll switch back into snowman.js. And I'm going to create two more variables, one for the tummy distance and one for the foot distance. So tummy distance and foot distance. I'll just space these out so they line up a bit neater. So the ball.x and ball.y are the same. We're testing the same snowball. The x position of all three of them is the same, but the y position will change. So this one will be plus 35 and this one will be plus 80. And those are the same numbers we figured out down the bottom. And then what we need to do is use those two in here. So we need to say not just if the head distance is less than that minimum distance, also, or not also, either the head distance can be less than that, or the tummy can be less than that, or the foot can be less than its minimum distance. If any of those three things are true, then the snowman has been hit. So if head distance is less than 25, or tummy distance is less than 30, or foot distance is less than 35. Any of those things are true. And that's how we write or. We just use two vertical lines. Remember, we write and with two ampersands. So it's just the equivalent or. So it hits the head, it hits the tummy, and it hits the foot. So there you go. That's a simple snowman sketch basically working. We're detecting when it's colliding with either the head, the tummy, or the foot. There's still a few limitations here. The snowman is pretty easy to hit, so we could come back and alter this example so that maybe the snowman moves up or down, or it makes it harder to hit. Maybe it speeds up over time. That could be fun to play around with. Another limitation is that there's only ever one ball on the screen at a time. So we could think about ways of having more than one ball on the screen at a time. We could think about how to keep score, like how to count how many times the snowman has been hit. Maybe we could think about how to improve the graphics. I'm sure you could think of lots of different things to do with this, so I'd love to hear what you do with it, and I'll probably come back and work some more on this example in some future videos. Okay, thanks, and good luck with your creative coding.